Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us for this first meeting of 2024. I hope you've had a good holiday season and 2024 is off to a good start and good start in lots of ways. I think we would all agree that 2023 was a year when hate and intolerance really poisoned so much of the time. And I'm hoping optimistically, I would say, not with a real basis for this hope, but that 2024 is a year when understanding and acceptance really flourish. And like many of you in different spots, we rely on our end of the year data to look at the patterns and trends around Middlesex County. In calendar year 2023, we saw a 50% increase in the cases of civil rights violations that made it to a prosecution. Now, granted, those numbers are small. A total of 33 cases were charged over the year, but that still is a 50% increase from the 22 where we were last year. And as you know, those cases really are a priority for us. We are always looking to answer that question. Do people wonder if they belong here? And in one of the most tragic cases, in May of 2023, Dean Capsalis, a 56-year-old man, was convicted of shouting a really awful racial insult at Henry Tapia, who was 34 years old, a man of color, on his way home about 4:30 in the afternoon from work. Mr. Capsalis then drove his Dodge Dakota truck at Mr. Tapia, running over and killing him on a residential street in front of lots and lots of witnesses. Capsalis was convicted of second-degree murder, violation of constitutional rights causing bodily injury, and a variety of other charges. He has been seeking to have those charges thrown out since then. Just last week, we were successful in having the judge deny his last motion to throw those charges out. It was truly all murder at some level is senseless, but this was a really senseless tragedy. And it was fueled by hate and anger. And the fact that Henry Tapia died with the last words he heard being a terrible racial insult, meant to intimidate him, threaten him on the basis of his color. A few short steps from his house where he lived with his wife and 3 children. We cannot tolerate that. So later this month, now that the motions are over, we expect that the judge will sentence him. Because of the second-degree murder conviction, he automatically gets a life sentence. The question before the judge will be when he sets the parole eligibility. And one of the things that's very important to us is we are going to be seeking a from and after sentence based on the civil rights violation, so that those two don't merge together, so that he should get sentenced on the murder, get his sentence on that, and then when he's finished at some point with that sentence, he should then go to serving the sentence on the violation of civil rights. So in addition to those criminal cases, the 33 we've charged, we've had 43 incident reports of hate or bias activity that doesn't rise to the level of a crime. Those have come from lots of places, law enforcement, schools, the webpage. Either there wasn't enough for a criminal charge or somebody could not be identified as having committed that offense. And the prevalence of the extremist group activity has really led to a more difficulty in identifying folks. We've had a lot of hateful vandalism and graffiti. We've got this shadowy presence, and accountability really becomes very elusive. These acts are often carried out under the guise of anonymity, and it's very hard to get to that level of responsibility where we can charge people. And statewide, on the executive level of public safety, EOPS, they reported that there were 440 reported incidents of hate crimes. And that was relatively small increase. It had 406 the year before. And that came from 91 city or state, city or town police departments and 8 campus agencies. You know, we in the last month or so, because college students have been on break, have seen a decline in what's been happening on college campuses. I have every reason to think in the next couple of weeks, as kids come back to our 21 colleges and universities, we'll start seeing things head up again. So those pictures are really a wake-up call, reminding us of how much there still is to do, acknowledging them being the first step, developing strategies to do that prevention, education, fostering an inclusive environment. That's all part of that. Last month, I shared with you that Governor Healy had announced the creation of the state's hate crime awareness and response team, referred to as the HART, H-A-R-T team. Today, we're going to learn some more about that. HART was launched in direct response to the increase that both individual DA's offices and EOPs were seeing in hate crimes. The goal is to track and investigate those crimes and really target some of those groups that I mentioned that are helping to perpetrate these incidents. The team will continue to enhance the collection of data across the state. It will do information sharing with all levels of law enforcement, with the goal of really identifying both state, national, and global patterns and trends. So that is the task that is before them. We're very fortunate today to have 3 members of the team with us. I'm particularly proud that 2 of the members, initial members of this team, are troopers who have been were serving in our office until they were taken onto the team. I think it really reflects what we've been doing here and the kind of expertise that they bring to this. John Struzzulo, who is the lieutenant and the unit commander, is in the middle of doing another presentation as well, so he'll be back and forth. But let me tell you a little bit about Lieutenant Struzzulo. Since joining the state police in 2005, Lieutenant Struzzulo, and we've had him appear at some of these other task forces, he is a man who has been everywhere, just lots and lots of expertise in specialized units. He's worked in the Violent Fugitive Apprehension Unit, the Drug Unit, Interstate Drug Reduction Enforcement Team, Technical Services, and Underwater Recovery. He's really led a lot of complex investigations, leading to the arrest of drug traffickers and fugitives. Prior to joining the state police, Lieutenant Struzzulo served 9 years as a municipal firefighter and a campus police officer at MIT. He holds a bachelor's degree and a master's of arts in law enforcement administration from Western New England University. With him is Trooper Emily Tedisco, who's been a trooper since October of 2015. Prior to her assignment to the HART team, Trooper Tedisco worked for our office in special investigations for 3 years. She was previously assigned to the State Police Academy, serving as a drill instructor. For 3 classes, she had been assigned to the Medford, Holden, and Athol Barracks as a uniformed patrol trooper. And she's been served on the governor's hate crime task force since 2017. Prior to joining the state police, Trooper Tedisco worked for the Malden Police Department as a cadet, and she received her Bachelor of Arts in Justice Studies and a Bachelor of Arts in Sociology from the University of New Hampshire. Also a Middlesex alum, Trooper Mike Sullivan. He has been a trooper for about 10 years. Prior to becoming a trooper, he was a patrolman for about 12 years in the town of Bedford. And while in Bedford, he was also assigned to the Regional Drug Task Force for about 4 years. He was qualified as a drug recognition expert. And upon completing the State Police Academy, Trooper Sullivan was assigned to Troop C, where he did uniform patrol. He then came to our homicide unit for about 5 years, and then was elected to join the governor's new HART team. So I'm happy to have all of them here. I know Trooper Tedisco and Trooper Sullivan are going to carry the ball a little bit for us while we wait for Lieutenant Struzzulo to join them. So thank you both for being here.
Thank you very much, Marion. I think we're going to get a PowerPoint up here in a second. My name's Trooper Emily Tedisco, and I'm here with Trooper Mike Sullivan. We have had a couple issues with the internet, so if anything goes crazy, just try to flag us down or shoot us a text. We're in the FBI building, so unfortunately, we can't show our faces. We don't have camera access. That's one of the FBI rules. But many of you may know what we already look like, and you're not missing much. Um, so as DA Ryan said, we are two of the new members of the Hate Crime Awareness and Response Team for the Massachusetts State Police. I'm just going to see if this works here. Sarah, I don't think it's letting me switch. I apologize. Might have to just click through for me. Thank you very much. So as previously stated, the creation of the HEART unit. So essentially in 2017, Governor Baker signed an executive order to reestablish the governor's task force on hate crimes. And then in 2022, the task force became a legislative task force on hate crimes. And due to the number and the rise of hate crimes in November of 2023, as DA Ryan stated, the Haley Driscoll administration announced a new statewide initiative to confront and deter hate crimes. With that being said, in a tremendous backing from EOPS, the Executive Office of Public Safety and Security, the state police formed the HEART team. So essentially the HEART team is a statewide unit. We currently have 5 troopers assigned to this unit, and we work in conjunction with the anti-terrorism unit and the JTTF. And all of these troopers have various backgrounds. Myself and Mike Sullivan, we come from Middlesex, where we just had, a lot of experience in a variety of crimes, and we have a lot of experience with the community and working with the community. We have a trooper that came from the STOP team, which is the SWAT team. Another trooper came from the South Shore, where he worked on the community action team. And then we have Kareem Elhamwe, who is currently serving time in the military, but on an 8-month. But he has a very extensive background in the military and multiple language skills. If you can just switch to the next slide. Sorry. So it's just a graph of where we stand under the Massachusetts State Police. We fall under the Division of Homeland Security and Preparedness under anti-terrorism and the Joint Terrorist Task Force. And the Joint Terrorist Task Force is in conjunction with the FBI. And that's why we were formed under the hate crime response team. And a reason for that, you can switch to the next slide. It's okay. I'll talk through it. Thank you very much. The reason we fall under this Division of Homeland Security, what you're seeing now, I think you've had a little knowledge about this in the past from Detective Trisulo. But essentially, there's already a plan set in place underneath the Joint Terrorist Task Force. So we're able to have an open line of communication with the Commonwealth Fusion Center. And what that does is the Commonwealth Fusion Center, as you may already have had a presentation on this, they're a fusion center, and they serve primary local focal points within the state and local environment for the receipt, analyst gathering, and sharing threat-related information among state, local, tribal, and federal partners. Essentially, the HEART team was created under the Department of Homeland Security and Joint Terrorist Task Force for many reasons, to include this federal partnership, but also because of this formed relationship with the Fusion Center, the MSP Watch Center. So when we get a suspicious activity report from anywhere, and you can go to the next slide if you don't mind, it comes in through the Watch Center, but really what comes in is from either our local partners or even private entities. They report to their local police department, their local jurisdiction, and with that, it goes up to the Fusion Center, and they create what's called a suspicious activity report. So like you've seen a lot on the news lately, synagogues are getting bomb threats almost daily. We've seen it via email. A lot of it's via email. Sometimes it's phone calls, and these phone calls are voice over IP, so we're not able to track where these threats are coming from. But we're able to at least provide our stakeholders with this information that these threats are happening. We can provide them a level of security The local police department, the MSP bomb squad may go down and do a sweep of the synagogue. But also, it's just a line of communication that's already been developed and has already worked so well between ourselves, the FBI, the Commonwealth Fusion Center, and the Watch Center. We all share information readily, and we are able to pump that information out to stakeholders and community leaders and DA's offices in order to provide an overlook and safety view of what's going on. And that's very important. So if you can go to the next slide. This is just essentially what I just spoke about. It's really a graph of how we work. You know, you get the report from the local police department or other entity, like I said, a synagogue, any private entities, and they notify the Commonwealth Fusion Center. The JTTF gets notified. They then report, they do open source checks, they check the email addresses where it's coming from, they look across statewide, they look across federal wide where we're seeing these other emails. You know, as far as across to Las Vegas, we might get the same email threat, and we can all share that information nationwide. And then the FBI will start to do guardian checks and open tabs on these email addresses to try to keep track and try to track down who is generating these threats. And then we'll assist with the local police departments to coordinate. So that's essentially why the HEART team was put underneath the JTTF, because of that already formed relationship to provide this data and help us try to figure out where we can go and who we can talk to try to make people feel more comfortable and try to get some of these threats taken care of. If you can go to the next slide. So our HEART team mission, we're dedicated to enhancing federal and state local partnerships, work to strengthen relationships with community leaders for a more efficient and effective response to hate crimes and hate-based incidents, enhance statewide data collection and information sharing in order to identify statewide, national, and global patterns, increase stakeholder collaboration and educational outreach, and partner with the Municipal Police Training Committee to equip law enforcement with best practices for hate crime response. And in part of that, enhancing our relationship with local law enforcement and federal partners, we really look forward to enhancing our relationship with the district attorney's offices across the state and the attorney general's office. So as you know, as we previously stated, Mike and I come from Middlesex, you know, the best district attorney's office in the state. But we know when we have an issue, whether no matter what it is, you know, if it's a child endangerment or crimes against children, we know the ADA to reach out to. There's a homicide, we know the ADAs to reach out to, and we really want to build that connection where if local police departments have an issue with the hate crime, they know a good point of contact in that district attorney's office to talk to, who knows the law and can kind of direct them in the direction that they need to be in. And I think that's very important. And I know for us, like in Middlesex, we had a very big open line of communication. In, you know, it was a 24-hour a day, 7-day a week. If we had something that we needed just assurance on, we needed legal information, we knew who to contact. And I think that's very important. And I can't speak for other district attorneys' offices, but I know that we want to build that relationship across the state so that these hate crimes are charged appropriately. If we can't charge these hate crimes appropriately, we're not going to have the data that we need. They're either going to be underreported or vice versa. They could be overreported. But I think a lot of the trends that we're seeing is that they're not appropriately reported, and there's some underreported because people don't know how the law works. And just in data collection and making sure that, again, that they're reported correctly. And that's working with EOPS and the MPTC, the Municipal Police Training Committee, to help streamline that process. So we're working on a process where local police departments can either share their reports with us so we can track and make sure that they're being reported and reported properly. And also just training police officers to be able to recognize when there is a hate crime. You can go to the next slide, please. So to be able to recognize when there is a hate crime, you need to understand the hate crime defined by mass law. And that's one of the things here. And I think there's some misconceptions, and probably a lot of people on the Zoom already know the law probably better than Mike and I. But just that, the hate crime is interchangeably a bias crime or a bias related motivation, but it's not a standalone offense. And I think that's very important for people to recognize. It look like we're frozen. Can you guys hear us?
Yep, we can hear you.
Yep.
It just went silent.
Emily?
You guys got us?
Yep, we got you.
We realized no one was moving, so I don't know what you guys heard last, but I'll just kind of go back as to having that collaboration with district attorneys and training police officers to know about hate crimes in the general law and what a hate crime offense is important for us, I think, to spread that message through training and having those relationships. As many of you probably know, hate crimes are not a standalone offense. And they have to be motivated by a bias, and the victim of that crime has to be a member of the protected group. So essentially, you need an underlying criminal offense, you need the offender's intent, and then you need a victim that has one of these protected characteristics underneath the law as it's currently written. You may also hear us reference a hate incident in this presentation. A hate incident is also conduct motivated by hate or bias, but it does not meet the elements of a hate crime under mass law. And we'll give an example of that later on in this presentation. Go to the next slide, please. So these are the protected groups defined by the statute, and it's 7. There's race, religion, ethnicity, handicap, gender identity, and sexual orientation. And I can say, just through the hate crime task force that I'm on and bills that are getting pushed up through the state, they're working to add some more protected groups to this statute, and that includes, sex, other gender orientations. But as of now, as the law stands, these are the 7 protected groups underneath the mass general law for hate crimes. Next slide, please. So these are just a few clips that we took from some articles and just kind of show examples of what we're seeing in Massachusetts. As DA Ryan said, you've had some of the highest in 2022 hate crimes reported. And I think we're seeing it a lot more in the news because it's become a lot more prevalent. And that's why we were kind of formed to try to figure out why we have these hate crime incidents and how we can educate and stop the hate crimes from rising in Massachusetts. Next slide, please. So this is an example, as previously stated by DA Ryan. 2022 was the highest year since 2002. And in 2002, you can kind of correlate some of the high hate crimes. There was a 500% rise of hate crimes against Muslims, probably a direct result, correlation to September 11th. And then we kind of saw a decline through 2018. And last year we had 440 incidents reported. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this is just a capture of kind of what we're seeing, bias motivation reported in 2022. As you can see, anti-race and ethnicity is the highest with 53.2%. It did fall from 59.3% in 2021, but then we had an uptick in anti-religion. In 2021, it was 15.7%. In 2022, we saw a 21.1% increase. And anti-sexual orientation is also an increase to 19.7%. And unfortunately, we don't have 2023 stats yet. It'll probably be a couple more months until that comes out. They do a end of the year yearly report, so we'll probably see those by March. So these are 2022. So I would hate to say it, but I think we'll be a little bit higher in 2023 for a lot of these. As DA Ryan stated, we're kind of only going up right now. And next slide, please. So these are the crimes that we're seeing reported. Destruction and vandalism. So, you know, tagging of buildings, spray painting. You know, I think we've seen it multiple times, spray painting, you know, swastikas on synagogues and things like that. There was 143 reported incidents of this in 2022. And then we have intimidation at 138. And what I find interesting is the simple assault and aggravated assault. We had 100 simple assaults and 54 aggravated assaults. So if you combine those, you know, against these victims, there's 154 assaults. And I think that's something that we need to really take seriously and that we need to combat going forward. Next slide, please. And these are who we're seeing being affected, 434 individuals. And then we have businesses and government coming in second and third. And you can go to the next slide. Thank you. And in 2022, these were the communities that we saw most affected. Boston was the highest at 159. And, you know, you can also paint the picture of a lot of protests and things that go on in front of the State House and various groups fighting with each other, you know, for why Boston may be a little bit higher than other cities and towns. And then we have Cambridge and Newton. Cambridge had 48 incidents and Newton reported 20. And as you can see, an important takeaway is incidents are not just occurring in major urban areas and cities. We are seeing 20 reported incidents in Newton. In other communities like Marblehead, Arlington, which is why for us in this unit, community outreach is just so important. We want to understand what's going on and listen to ideas and how we make strides to drive these numbers down in your communities and what we can do, you know, hearing from the community, hearing from community leaders and stakeholders, and then going out and educating is how we're going to drive these numbers down. Next slide, please. This is just a little indication and a little graph of how we sit nationally. There is a lot of correlation between the national numbers and numbers in Massachusetts. Not that that's a good thing, but I don't think we stand alone across the country. We're seeing the same type of rise. So that the graph that you see that's in purple and green is your 2019 to 2020 incidents and levels and how they compare to the graph that's in yellow and blue, which is your 2021 and 2022 graphs. And as you can see, race, ethnicity are the focal point of a lot of these bias crimes and hate crimes across the country, followed by religion and then followed by sexual orientation. So it is a growing number, but we can see that the same groups are repeatedly targeted in these incidents. And just a quick thing about the FBI's incident-based reporting system. Sorry, I know that I made you turn too soon. It's NIBRS. So the FBI's National Incident-Based Reporting System is NIBRS. And that's a standard for all law enforcement crime data reporting in the United States. And EOPS collects NIBRS and UCR data, which is the former way that it was collected through the FBI for all law enforcement agencies in Massachusetts and ensures compliance. So everyone is mandated to make these reports across the state, and they are followed up by the Executive Office of Public Safety that they're reporting their crimes through NIBRS. And that's just to accurately track crime data and offenses. And I think one of our major goals, as we stated, is to make sure that these are being tracked appropriately, make sure that they're being charged appropriately, whether that starts at the police officer level and then goes to the district attorney's office, that when, a supervisor's reading these reports, they know that it's being reported correctly and they are being charged, or when it gets to the district court level, an attorney's looking it over and saying, hey, we need to add, this crime. This seems to be a hate bias, a hate motivated crime. And then it's getting charged correctly. And in that we're collecting this data. Next slide, please.
All right. Good morning, Mike Sullivan. So this next slide that we're going to talk about, Marion already touched upon it. It's a quick clip that we have. So we'll play it and then we'll talk in a second. Okay, we can bypass it. That's fine. Again, Marion already touched upon it, but this is a road rage incident that escalated when it didn't need to be. And words were exchanged between a white male and a black male. And it escalated when the white male hurled a derogatory slur towards a black male. This was captured on a Ring camera system. And that assisted us, the Middlesex DA's office, with charging Dean Capsalis with violating constitutional rights, and he was found guilty of that charge, along with murder. So we'll just skip to the next slide. So the other big thing that the HEART team has to do is educate police departments on freedom of speech. Freedom of speech allows individuals to express themselves and be protected in their speech. Even though their speech may be morally wrong, but it is still protected speech. And that's what we have to educate the police officers on, and the public. Just because somebody might not like that speech, it is still protected under the freedom of speech. The next one. So recently there was a town meeting in Winthrop that was on Zoom, and there is also a video clip of this that we're going to play. That will start. Okay, that's fine. During this town meeting, which was Zoomed, and people are there in person, individual on Zoom identified as Judy Stroyer hurled a derogatory slur aimed at the Jewish community. This individual is wearing a black mask and had a swastika displayed behind him. Although this type of speech may be hurtful, it is still protected by the First Amendment. A search of the individual Judy Stroyer revealed that the name has been used frequently throughout the country at online town meetings, where their agenda is to cause controversy. Winthrop police had reached out to the HEART team after this incident, and we are working on a proactive way to prevent Zoom disturbances in the future. It is difficult because it is a public forum, and can't mute everybody, so we'll have to figure out a way to prevent something like that in the future, working with the DA's office, trying to see what legally we can do to stop somebody from joining the Zooms. Next slide. what the HEART team has to offer. Once an incident has been reported to the local police department, we will work jointly with that agency to determine if a crime has been committed. If one has been committed, we work collaboratively with the district attorney or attorney general's office to determine the correct charges. If it is determined that a crime has not been committed, we explore avenues to stop future incidents in the future from occurring. Again, it could be freedom of speech, where it wasn't, how should I put it, that it wasn't perceived correctly, where somebody was offended, but again, it was a protected speech. How do we stop that from happening in the future? We could have community outreaches where we come to places of worship, speak with the members of the organizations, and teach them about how to protect their buildings, how to protect future incidents from happening. We would go to the local schools, colleges, universities, and educate the faculty and staff about people's rights. Again, freedom of speech, what is hate crime, and what is hate speech. And probably the biggest thing is the training for law enforcement is to educate them at the beginning of their careers of what to look for, how to identify hate speech, hate crimes, and the correct charges to charge the individual or individuals. The goals of the HEART team is we'd like to develop a web-based reporting data collection system for all the civil rights police officers of every department, so we can have real-time data collection to determine if there is a place, geographical area that's being targeted, and we can deploy resources to. So if we get reports on this web-based reporting system, we can the next day, that day, act on them instead of months down the road with a current reporting system where we don't know what's going on. This will be a live time reporting system where we can actually assist the local police departments or colleges, universities, or any other entity that is reporting this. We will employ a comprehensive team-centered approach to enhance our conduct stakeholder and educational research, prevent such crimes, and respond to this complex and pressing issue. Members of the HEART will endeavor to create a training curriculum in conjunction with the MPTC and set forth best practices for law enforcement response to hate crimes. We'd also like to have a working relationship with the local DAs and Attorney General's office, so we can have, as Emily said earlier, the correct charges for individuals and to bring them to justice. And the other thing is accessing grants so we can train more police officers and sit down with the district attorney's offices. So we are getting the correct training also with the updated charges and new bills that are being set forth. So we are a new unit, and we're hoping to have a great working relationship with every DA's office in it, in the Attorney General's office. And we do have a website that we can be reached at. It's MSP HEART, HART, at pol.state.ma.us. We already have been receiving multiple emails from local police departments requesting assistance, and we are helping them as we speak.
Yeah, if you can just go to the next slide, I think that has that email address up. And yeah, so it's essentially, you know, as Trooper Sullivan said, we are a new unit, and we're just kind of feeling out how and what best practices work to reach the community, reach the stakeholders, and also form these relationships. I think some of our goals right now are to really make sure that hate crimes are tracked appropriately, that police officers are trained, and that we can start building relationships with district attorneys' offices and also the local community. There are a lot of resources that are out there through federal grants, state grants for protections of your houses of worship in the communities. I know there's probably a lot of community leaders on this Zoom right now. So we're working to build those relationships with those entities and then be able to go out and talk to you with those, with either the state or federal partners on how we can provide you with grants, how you can appropriately sign up for grants to protect and get some money to protect your houses of worship, and just talk to your community. So if there's an issue that you think you have, that you think you want us to come and speak or just have a face to face, we're glad to do that. We really want to get out there and start to build these relationships so that you know who we are, and we know who you are. And when there is a time of need, we have that line of communication already open. I think that's very important as we start to tread through everything that's going on in this, with social media and the media. I think it's important that we all have an open line of communication, and people of your community can trust us as the police. I know sometimes that's hard, and we can give resources and build that relationship. So thank you very much, Marion, for having us on. I think Middlesex is a great place to start because it's a lot of friendly faces, and it's a great place for us to start to build this unit in relationship. So thank you very much for having us.
Thank you, Mike and Emily. It's great to have you. And, as you begin this work, I know we've got some great folks here. I'm happy to see Representative Lewis has joined us, and folks that may have some questions about the work, or Representative Lewis, I don't know if you want to respond to sort of the whole idea of this new task force. I know you were with us when the governor launched it.
Thank you so much. Sorry for my tardiness and joining you this morning, but so grateful for the work that our wonderful DA is doing and the work of the task force. I find that it's a response to sort of the overly simplified belief that sometimes things just can't be done. Oh, that's a First Amendment issue, thus we can't do anything about it. And listening this morning just reminded of what it means when people push past the initial, it's a little complicated, and living into the gray area of complexity, especially on something as important as keeping people safe and making sure they feel supported. But all I have to add is just how grateful I am for our wonderful DA, but the folks spearheading this task force, and eager to see what we can do, not only in our region, but statewide as well.
Thank you. Anybody have questions, comments?
Yep.
Yep.
Reverend Lloyd here. How you doing?
I'm well,
Michael?
thanks. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Michael, good. Thank you for your presentation. Let me do one comment, one recommendation, and one question. Comment is, I appreciate your task. I recognize you're getting up and getting started. I look forward to meeting you in person. I extend my invitation to you right now. Come on out to Framingham. Let's meet. Let me suggest a comment, and that is this. Given what you said about the disconnect between the training of our officers and police departments and frontline people and understanding what is a hate crime and what's not, there is a disconnect. I appreciate you recognize that. Consequently, when I look at these numbers ain't really telling me something that I can really trust in. I just want you to know that. Okay? So I'm not trusting them, because there's a gap in terms of what's being reported, what's understood, and what have you. So that's one part of my comment to you. I look forward to your task force to work on that. Secondly, on the ground level, a recommendation, and that is, we have crimes, they're committed, and then the statement that's published, they're saying whether or not it's a hate crime or not a hate crime. We need to do a better job for the average public to understand why something is or is not a hate crime. And what happens normally is it's published, there's a crime, what have you, and we don't hear anything else later about it. And then within your office space, you make that determination it was or was not a hate crime. Somewhere along the line, we've got to get those. I think you had 3 points there. We've got to close that disconnect, because otherwise we are in danger of becoming very numb to it in the larger public person in the public space. I'm numb to it. Why was that not a hate crime? So some kind of follow-up, communication, designation, and being able to say it missed this category 1, 2, or 3, or whatever the criteria we have. So that's my recommendation there. And then the other question I have is this: who is doing collecting understanding about data along the lines of the degree for which we, our society, are becoming numb and accepting hate crime? Catch what I'm going at? So what's happening is that, you know, the level for which it is becoming, yes, okay, I got more happening, but as a community, are we moving to change and accepting that this is just the way it is? So I don't know where we're getting this data, what have you, because that's helpful for us on the line, on Main Street, of trying to take it and move the needle. And if I have a community that says, well, you know what, it's just a part of the nature, it's what it is. The number of things that happen in Jewish community in my synagogues or in churches or whatever. And so who's gathering that kind of info that helps us to say we need to really push in this area so that the larger community doesn't become increasingly number of just acceptance that this is the way it is. So I just raised that question. I don't know who's doing that. That may be the task force or whoever.
Yes, thank you. And Reverend, we did freeze a little bit, like I said. So we caught the tail end of your recommendation. I do apologize if we missed something. We're trying to fight the FBI internet over here. I think that's a good question. I think the governor's hate crime task force has really started to try to track and find ways. It is hard, obviously, because of the internet and the media and everything we see. I think you're right. I think we do become numb to it, and that's a sad aspect of it. But I think that's why we're here. We're trying to hear you, the community leaders, the stakeholders, on what we can do, whether it's going to universities, whether it's going to high schools, even as low as middle schools, and really trying to teach the generations coming up that this is not acceptable. Even if it's not a crime, it's still not acceptable. And that's something that we're trying to focus on. And I think, we need a lot of buy-in from our community leaders, and we need a lot of buy-in from the school districts and other stakeholders. And that's what we really want to work to do. And I think showing our faces throughout the community, we can try to get that going. And that's really one of our main goals. We can give all the trainings in the world to police departments in their trains, but it really starts, with us going out to communities and showing why this is unacceptable. And, I took a trip down to the Holocaust Museum, and you learn that stuff at a very early age. And I think we need to be reminded of some of the things of the Holocaust and what went on, and teach these younger generations that we can't repeat these behaviors. And I think that's very important. And it's a reminder, and we got to find a way locally to remind our society and remind people of the Commonwealth why this is unacceptable. So I accept your challenge, and we're going to try. And if you have any ideas, we'd love to sit down with you outside of this and talk to you about it. It'd be fantastic.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate it. I look forward to meeting you outside of your FBI building where I can't see what you look like. All right.
And Reverend, three pieces are, number one, I think there's some ambiguity in the hate crime statutes we have in Massachusetts. And as I know, Representative Lewis knows, we right now with Representative Wynn and the Attorney General, myself, and a number of other people are pushing a piece of legislation to clarify some of those definitions. I think that will make it easier to charge. The second piece is, I think you're right. It's great that we have a hard team. I don't think that should become a cottage industry. The goal should not be to have that team last into perpetuity. I think we should get a handle on this issue. And I think Trooper Tedisco is right. It starts with younger people. I mean, it's one of the purposes behind our social justice roundtables that we're out in the schools doing. We started those again. It's really getting kids at a very young age to be talking about these things so that they grow up with a different perspective on that. So, Christopher, I saw you had your hand up. You have a question?
Yes, thank you. From Somerville, good to see you again, Marion. Last night I was with youth in the Summer Nova. It's a program that was discussing Martin Luther King's different speeches. And I said, our mayor was in attendance, and I asked her about mapping and if she works in the use of tools that we were touching on in this conversation. I wanted to connect with a suggestion of what happens with the data. Can we use similar technologies like GIS that are CompStat that has been used by I know New York City since the 90s. Plus we've seen like in Omicron waves, we had the commandeered services of the one person we have in Somerville in our engineering department who knows GIS to work with the Omicron wave so we get heat mapping of where hotspots were. What I mean is in terms of all this talk about teaching, it's helpful to have infographics that help to illustrate trends. We're getting the data, but you need something I think that's helpful in different mediums. And so my question is, okay, when you have the data, can you also budget in terms of the skill set that you need to bring on board to storytell that in terms of getting that turned into a map? I think then that question becomes for advocates like myself on the Human Rights Commission, can we overlap that with some of the other information that we know about vulnerability indexes of different municipalities or that uses other common census data. And then we can, I think, do some more effective partnering with that you're looking for. You're wanting partnering and you're wanting discourse. So I think it just will help to have some of those type of metrics in line with the pipeline of what to do with the data.
We have tried to do that with some of our data. I've mentioned this before. The two most interesting things we've seen in terms of trying to layer out where these happen, the two most common sites for the incidents we see are places that involve food, like restaurants or farms or things like that, and ATMs. We have a disproportionate number of these incidents that get reported to us that have either happened in a food setting or an ATM setting. And I don't know what that says, but I find that interesting. I think you're right. When you start really drilling down, it is like we see the graffiti primarily, the vast number is in schools. So that really points us towards educating younger people. But I do find it interesting about that food and ATM piece. Other questions, comments? No? All right. Well, thank you. Again, thank you, Mike. Thank you, Emily, for being with us.
Thank you.
Oh, Jeffrey, did you have a question? Sorry.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thanks as well. I live in Belmont, and the Henry Tapia murder is just a terrible thing. And thank all of you on the phone for prosecuting that. Just horrible. I also, I think I emailed some of you. I'm Jewish, and I live in I go to a temple in Belmont that had one of these bomb hoaxes, and I bring my 10-year-old daughter to Sunday school, and she's turned away because there's bomb sniffing dogs there. What do I say to her? You know, and I sort of commenting on that just to say I have great appreciation for the work that all of you are doing. I also understand DA Ryan, you saying that it's elusive, right? How do you find those people doing these things, right? There were 400 temples across America that got that weekend, and it has real effect with real people, with kids in real communities in Massachusetts. And I understand it's impossible. But we were sitting talking, like, we are so grateful. The FBI, I don't know if Hart was directly involved. We've been talking to the FBI about and giving them digital evidence, whatever we could about that. It was the second one we have had since October 7th. But it must be really hard. How do you combat that? And we were trying to figure out, like, how do you deter that when you don't even know who did it? Can you go to their middle school when that person is growing up to try to intervene so they don't have hate in their hearts against, you know, people of color or Jews or people, you know, who are Muslim or whatever, whomever, right? I don't know how you combat that, but so I just wanted to say thank you, because some of the things you've talked about are important to me, and you guys are doing great work. The only other thing I would say is that someone was raising this issue of, I think the Reverend was saying, this issue of a hate crime versus the incidents that are being discussed that aren't a crime, and how do we root that out? I think on the latter, because the people on this call are about criminal activity, they're handcuffed when it's the First Amendment or whatever. I think we just need to stand up and say, in my church, in my temple, in my community, in my university, I don't want that. That's not appropriate. That's not cool. If you want to take that to the public square, go ahead, but we're not going to support that, and we're going to rally against it. I don't know what else to do, right? If it's not a crime, Marion can't, and her team can't prosecute it. But what do we do as people in Massachusetts to stop that kind of behavior? They had Jews did 9/11 hanging from Route 1 in Danvers before October 7th. That's freedom of speech, right? You can rally against it, but I don't know that DA Ryan can prosecute those people, right? So there it is. But thank you all for the work you do. It's not unrecognized.
Well, thank you, Jeffrey. You're right. You know, there were 400 facilities, Jewish facilities, that have received those threats. We had 30 right here in Middlesex County. And, you know, our position is we take them as real threats until they are proven otherwise. So we're responding that way. You just don't know. And I'm also very cognizant that in some way we are privileged, especially here in Middlesex. We have a lot of institutions, synagogues, churches, schools, whatever it is, that have the resources to provide additional security. That is not true everywhere. And that makes the burden fall heavier, as it often does, on people who are less resourced. You know, we have lots of places in this county where when there's a threat, not only are the police providing security, but the facility is able to supplement that. We know there's a big part of this state where that can't happen. And we can never make the mistake of thinking, you know, this is just a routine thing and we can ignore that. And that's a big piece, I think. Catherine. Catherine, do you have a question? And if you do, you mute so we can't hear you. No? All right, maybe she'll pop in again. Again, I want to just thank everybody for this morning. You know, as we approach Martin Luther King weekend, I hope that while we're honoring a great leader's legacy, we really use that memory as a reminder of Dr. King's vision, a vision where equity, a world where equity, compassion, and understanding prevailed. And, you know, I began by saying I was optimistic that 2024 might be better. Some of the things we're seeing politically would certainly not support that hope. But I do believe in the power of people to change the course of where we're going. I think, you know, the governor's decision to start this HEART team, as Representative Lewis mentioned, is a piece of that. You are being willing to join these conversations with us is another piece of it. And I look forward to continuing that work. So thank you all for being here. Thank you. Thanks, Antonio. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.